to Convo Fango. Today we are joined by Keith, director of Firestarter, as you can see from that lovely background
Right.
happening. I feel like, what's the equivalent of like underdressed? I'm like the Zoom version of underdressed. I'm like, ah,
Right, right.
shit, bring on the flames, add it in post. All right. So thanks for coming to chat with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
So, when you're adapting something that obviously not only exists as a novel, but also the story exists as a movie as well, what are some of the challenges that you face as a director? I know you're working from a script by Scott Teems, but is there
Mm.
anything that you have in mind? Like, is that in your peripheral at all as far as differentiating from the '84 film and staying faithful to source material? Like, what is that thought process like?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. I had read the book when I was younger, and I had seen the original film and and felt like I knew them pretty through and through. So I was excited when I read Scott Teem's script to see that he was mixing it up a bit and that there were some things that were it was very true to the book and like the core of what I think the book's about, while not being beholden to necessarily all the different plot points that the book takes. Um, it's also nice in that I feel like the 1984 film is very, very close to the book in terms of plotting, in terms of like this happens and this happens, this
Hmm.
happens, and that exists. And there's a lovely Blu-ray of it, and anyone can watch it at any time. And this was an opportunity to do something a little bit different, to tell the same story, um, not beat for beat, but to tell it in a way that I felt like we could streamline the story a bit,
Hmm.
and focus it more on the things that I felt were really important in the book. In particular, the relationship between parents and children, being a father, and navigating childhood, which is difficult for any of us, particularly someone who's in middle school. We've aged Charlie up, so she's in middle school. Um, it's already hard enough, but when you have the ability to melt people's faces off, that causes, that's a bigger struggle.
Right? And that's something, well, a couple things. I really appreciated that you guys stayed true to the essence because, like you said, like if you're going to remake something beat for beat, then kind of what is the point, I guess?
Right.
So, what you really did is you took the core of it and the essence of what the story is about and then built around that, which I thought was a cool
Mm,
way to approach it. And then
mm.
also, I'm like, holy shit, just imagine being in middle school and like all of the things that you feel, right? Like, that is like the
Right.
least zen time of your life. And then
Yes.
having to put on top of that, like, okay, if at any moment I get like a little bit unzen, I might melt someone's fucking face off.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, no, it's an intense thing, and it's hard when you're thinking about it not to think back to when you were in middle school and
mhm.
how uncomfortable it was, and puberty, and just all these different things, and just life changing, and how you see the world, and how you see your parents, and all that stuff, and then right, add this layer of this potentially, no pun intended, but explosive power that's just under the circuit surface, that's there, that it becomes this sort of I don't know, I love that sort of crisis, that sort of coming in on a character when they're right in that moment, and
Yeah.
then living there as long as we can. That's for me what the book was really getting into, and so I wanted that to kind of be the spearhead for the rest of it.
I love it. And Ryan plays Charlie in this, and she just like so much of everything in the story and like success of this hinges on her performance, and she just
Yeah.
like blows it out of the water. What was that like working with her?
I mean, it was she was really incredible. She from her very first audition, she just had this sort of wisdom, wise beyond her years. I think it's both because she's been an actor for since she was like 5, but also she's just able to tap into her emotional energy in a way that's kind of remarkable. I don't know if it's kind of like this kind of inner insight into her own, kind of stuff she's struggling in, but she's able to kind of present it in a way that's very relatable. Um, and once it turns on, it's very hard for her to turn it off. It's funny. There'd be times in the shoot where they'd be big emotional scene, and Ryan can ramp it up or down, right? So she can go hysterical, or she can kind of bring it down to a low simmer. And the times when there were tears pouring down her face and she was kind of really just going nuts, you know, between takes, when we'd be finished, the tears would still flow. She'd still be crying. She'd show up. I'd be talking with the DP, looking at some scenes, and she'd show up in the tent, and she's sobbing, pouring down her face. And I'm like, "Hey, Ryan, everything good?" And she's like, "Yeah, fine, just fine." Uh, she's like got a popsicle.
Like, do you want to like comfort her at that moment, or
Yeah, I
or
mean,
do you kind of
and
like pull
that
back? 'Cause you're like, I need to keep you there. Like,
the reaction definitely from the crew. The first time they saw it, everyone turned to me, and they're like, "What are we gonna do? Like, is she okay? Like, she just had a breakdown?" I'm like, "This is what she does. This is her thing." And so it's an amazing ability to be able to. And so seeing it, there were a lot of times when you don't need the dialogue. It's just you can just see it in her eyes. She's able to convey this sort of intensity of this turmoil, this inner turmoil. It's rare. It's rare to see, and so I was really happy to be able to capture some of that.
yes, I was definitely impressed and definitely blown away. I also have to say I really enjoyed Zac Efron in this, and kind of watching him as like this like fierce but gentle, like protective Papa
Yeah.
Bear in the relationship. The chemistry between
Right.
him and Charlie and like the father-daughter love story was really endearing, and I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun with Zach. He was eager to kind of stretch some actorly muscles that I don't think people are used to seeing him
Right.
do, or certainly hadn't seen in earlier performances. So it was A, playing a dad, and B, that sort of at the core of the film is this kind of debate about how to raise a child in terms of protection versus freedom. And what I liked about what Zach brought to it was this sort of, I mean, they're under a lot of stress. This is a family that's on the run, that is in hiding, that they're living under pseudonyms. It's a very difficult lifestyle, and I thought Zach did a really good job of channeling that frustration and that constant feeling of any moment we could be found. And how do you stop? How do you keep your family safe? Well, you tell your daughter to bottle it up and bottle
Right.
it up. And he really went with that. And what's interesting is kind of, I don't think there's a wrong or a right answer. I think both Vicky and Andy have these different perspectives. Charlie's going to do what Charlie's going to do. But it
Charlie's
was
gonna
fun.
Charlie.
Charlie's going to Charlie. There's a monster there.
I really love. I feel like this kind of he has this line, a bit of a Papa Efron wisdom we'll call it, and I feel it kind of embodies his philosophy of it can't be a reaction, it has to be a decision.
Right.
And I was
That's
like,
like your
what a fucking great
Spider-Man.
philosophy. Yes,
It's like your Spider-Man responsibility line. And I remember when the
exactly.
first time reading the script, I was like, "Oh, guys, see what you're doing, teams." Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, right. It's these sort of there's a selflessness, I think, to Zach's performance in this that is interesting, right? Like he knows the story and he knows where it goes, and I think the kind of father approach of I am willing to sacrifice myself for my child, he's kind of imbues that. And so I feel like throughout he's fighting to keep her safe. He's fighting to train her to, well, not necessarily train her, but to teach her what he thinks is the right way to do things. And he eventually comes to a place, of course, where he has to let go. And I think a lot of his arc was about building that out and figuring that out. And so it was a lot of fun to explore those things with him.
I love that. Okay, speaking of fun, let's talk about obviously there's a lot of fire effects and
Yeah.
explosions happening. Did you have any fun
Yeah.
with that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that was, we were, I really pushed from the very beginning, and Blumhouse did too, to have this as practical as possible, particularly with the fire effects. Number one, I'm going to be judged against the original 1984 film when there was no VFX of the same, of what we're talking about. So I wanted to have it as real and in camera as possible. So all the fire in the film, 97% of the fire that's there is real. Some of it was shot as elements in Compton later, but, when you see Vicky's arms catch fire, that is Sydney Lemon's arms on fire.
Whoa.
Uh,
Okay.
and then that, for example, when Sydney and I had talked about the shooting of that sequence, she had said, what do you envision for this? Like, how do you want this to happen in pre-production? And I had said, ideally, if you're down with it, like, I want to light your arms on fire. And
How do you even pitch that? Like,
I know it's a little tough because she had seen the original, and Heather Locklear's got the oven mitts, right? And they like come out of frame. They're like, "Rrrr," and they're all like on fire, and she's like, oh no, which is playing it safe. So I thought, okay, let's meet with the stunt coordinator, have a conversation, do some trial runs, just explore it. Watch him set his arms on fire. Let's just see. And she went over and did it, and she sent me this video, and she was so excited. Her arms are on fire, and she's like, I can't believe this. So when it came day to do it, she was amazing. She, you're burning for maybe 5 seconds. I think that it's typically, but she was like, let's go longer, let's go bigger. Like,
oh my
more
God.
flame paste, like make it bigger. And what makes those sorts of scenes complicated is, then you've got Zac running in with this blanket to put it out. So he has to be prepared fully. And Zac has done stunts with fire before, so he was used to it. Our biggest one, however, was the finale with the silver suit guys. And that is real as well. So that was these 5 guys, stuntmen in silver suits, and those are flame-resistant suits that they use when they go out to airplane crashes and things. They have oxygen on under there, and we hit them with this flamethrower that shoots about 40 feet.
Oh God.
During test runs of that, it got so hot in that room, it was 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that people's COVID masks just melted off their faces.
Oh my God.
Disintegrated.
Just
So
a
we knew
casual
it was
Monday
legit.
afternoon. At
Yeah,
work,
that was, we had saved up. Those were the last 2 days we shot. We were ready for that. But, there's just something to it when you have that sort of, when you're able to get as much practically as possible. Mm-hmm. And I'll say it goes for the kind of gore effects as well, in terms of, the people who get burnt. I wanted those to be practical applications that are there. They're tangible. You can touch them. Then VFX can add to that. If you have something that's physically there, then VFX can obviously clean up stuff like wires and whatever. But they can also add certain elements. In Firestarter, we've got the rooms heating up and the air shimmering. Mm-hmm. So that was something that's great for VFX in terms of like, we can do this air shimmer in a way that's going to be believable, that doesn't take away from the practical effects happening but behind it.
Right. It was enhancing it. The practical effects did the heavy lifting.
Did all the heavy
groundwork.
lifting, laid all the groundwork. VFX comes in and is able to, like eye dilation. We played a lot with eye dilation. There's a way, if there's an old trick that if you dilate, if you shine a flashlight in one eye, the other pupil will also react. So you could play tricks like that. But it's complicated. It's time consuming. VFX can do a great job of doing an eye dilation. So.
Okay, guess what I'm going to be doing after this, though? Trying to do all the
Playing some
practical
games
eye
with that?
dilation
Yeah.
videos. My Instagram is going to be all my eyes dilating.
There you go. A bunch of pupil shots.
Yes. What's wrong with your feed? I'm like, I'm just trying out a little something.
Just trying some effects.
Just trying some effects. But I will say the burn effects were like sickening. I have an aversion to burns. I've badly burned my foot once like years ago, and I'm just like so disgusted by it, and it makes me instantly queasy. And like that arms, I was like, I was like looking away, and he's like wrapping them, and I was like, oh God, is it done? But it looked so good and so disgusting.
Yeah, they did such a great job. We had a lot of great folks working on some of those effects, and in fact, those arms. Those in particular, those prosthetics, I believe, were designed. We had a lot of people from the film Possessor. I don't know if you've seen Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, which had some great practical gore effects. Also disgusting. They were working on the arms and Agent Jules in the car to a certain extent. So, I wanted that. I remember when we shot that arm sequence in particular. That first take of it was like 15 minutes long. And we went through every stage of like wrapping the cellophane and putting on all the cream, and there were a lot of crew members who were like, I can't even handle this.
It
It's
was
too
like,
much.
yeah, it was definitely stomach churning. Well done.
Right. Yeah. Thank
Applause to
you.
all
Thanks.
involved. All right. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us today and for talking about
Absolutely.
disgusting things that make
There
me
we
a little bit,
go.
I feel
It's Fangoria,
a little
right?
funny inside, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Firestarter is in theaters and streaming on Peacock May 13th.